Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double A Team podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. Normally, I do the show with Ken Fang, which we plan on doing it tomorrow night. We will let you know more about the details on X. But tonight, I'm very, very honored and excited to have our previous guest. He is the lead college football writer with CBS Sports. We've had him on our show in the past. It is Shehan Jeyarajah from CBS Sports. Good evening, Shehan, and thank you for joining me once again. And first of all, I wanted to extend my congratulations on your firstborn child and being a first-time father. And I'm sure your life has been very, very busy, obviously, writing college football with all the the major changes that is going on, and also dealing with the major changes in your life as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me back on. Yeah, it's been a crazy few months. She's now 7 months old. So if you hear some chaos or screaming in the background, I apologize.
No problem. I know being what it's like, certainly being a father yourself there. And, we'll let you go as quickly as possible so you can take care of your child. All right, Shehan, obviously college football officially kicked off last week, and we had a 0-week game, Florida State losing to Georgia Tech in Dublin, and this was something that Ken and I discussed this. It's probably been discussed many, many times, and I don't know if you've had this opinion regarding the preseason rankings, and I know a lot of people don't like the idea of preseason rankings because obviously the teams are still gelling, and there's a lot of time to deal with the teams still learning to and finding their way with the transfer portals and putting the team together. So I wanted to ask you, should the preseason rankings go away, or does it make it your job a little more easier or difficult with or without the preseason rankings?
Well, I think that people think of the rankings as just being like some incredibly official, incredibly predictive, like it's right 100% of the time, and I don't think that's what it's meant to be. I think that it's all meant to add in a way to the entertainment product. And what I mean by that is when we head into the season and we see a game of Florida State versus Georgia Tech, like it should matter that the public thought that Florida State was one of the best teams in the country and that people didn't see Georgia Tech as a team that was one of the best teams in the country. And I think that this game would have gotten a lot less attention and mattered a lot less to people if people had no context of that rankings, right? If these were two teams that had no ranking by their name, that had no context, I just think that changes the way that we look at this product. And I think the other thing too is if you are not one of the top 10 to 15 halves in college football, like the fact that Georgia Tech beat a top 10 team, and we can quibble about whether Florida State should have been number 10 preseason. Obviously, they kind of proved that they shouldn't be, but it's a huge deal for the program to be able to say we have a top 10 win, that Boston College can say we opened the Bill O'Brien tenure with a top 10 victory. And so for me, I think that the rankings are great. I think they're very important. Now, we also have mid-season, right? The college football playoff rankings come out, and those are the real ones. Those are the ones that actually people live and die by. They're the ones that we decide a college football playoff and a national championship off of. So I think we've actually found a really nice balance of having these preseason ones, which frankly, again, are mostly just for entertainment in a lot of ways, in an entertainment product. And I think also then we have the contrast of the ones that start more like November when it comes to the official college football playoff rankings.
Mm-hmm. So now that the season is officially over, we are entering a new era of college football with all the massive conference realignments that we have seen now. It is really, really taking place now. Gone is Pac-12, and now it's down to Pac-2, and certainly it doesn't seem like the realignment is completely done. I know Big Ten, Iowa president said that we're kind of done for now, but it seems as though Big 12 right now is trying to lure away UConn, and even Northern Illinois was somehow mixed into the conversation. Shehan, I'm wondering, what is Big 12's merits on luring these two schools, if it's even remotely possible? And are we really done with the realignment? Certainly ACC is kind of on in perils. Obviously, FSU and Clemson wanted to leave the conference, and that still hasn't gone away completely. What is the latest on the realignment rumors right now?
Well, there's a couple different pieces of this story. One, for the SEC and the Big Ten, there's only one thing that's going to get them to move, and that's Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the only school that either would consider adding right now that they feel like is additive in a meaningful way. Look, if Florida State or Clemson comes on a bargain, maybe that would be a conversation they could have among themselves. I think North Carolina is actually a very interesting brand from that perspective. But the only school that is an auto add that the SEC and Big Ten would just say, yep, you want in, you're in, is Notre Dame. No one else really matters to those two conferences. I think for the ACC and for the Big 12, it's a little different. When you look at the Big 12, and let's look back at the last year or two of the Big 12, they were able to outduel the Pac-12 by undercutting them in a lot of ways, right? They were able to finalize their television contract. They made their pitch to the four schools that, of course, ended up joining the Big 12. They tried to kind of create some disruption in those leagues. And I think that when you look at the commissioner, Brett Yormark of the Big 12, he is always going to keep every option on the table. So, I hadn't heard anything about Northern Illinois, but speaking about the UConn thing specifically, Brett Yormark is a Northeastern guy. He is somebody who comes from a basketball background. He was president of the Brooklyn Nets back in the day, like on the business side of things. And so he values basketball a lot. We've heard a lot of rumors that in 2031, when the Big 12 contract is up, that they're going to try to sell football and basketball separately. No other conference does that. They sell all of their rights in tandem with each other. Well, the Big 12 thinks maybe if we sell football as one package and basketball as another package, both men's and women's, by the way, that potentially we could get even more money, especially because, frankly, the Big 12 right now, after the addition of Arizona especially, is the best basketball conference in the country. And adding UConn would have made them, pretty definitively the best basketball conference of all time, I think you could probably argue. So that's why UConn has been part of the conversation, is because all of these decisions in the past have been made by football, but Brett Yormark thinks there's excess value in having the best basketball programs as well, and trying to really leverage yourself and have a lot of power whenever it comes time to go to the negotiating table, for example, with the NCAA for March Madness. Not every president in the Big 12 is on board with that, especially because, you look at UConn, this is a bottom 10 program in college football. And for them to get to the point where they could even be just considered bad as opposed to embarrassing as a power conference team, that is a years and years effort. They are so far away from being able to do something like that. So that's why I don't think that it's going to happen right now. But there's no question Brett Yormark will probably come back to the table with UConn. Potentially, one that's been talked about in the past is Gonzaga, the idea of coming for their basketball programs as well. They are also certainly in soft ways trying to engage with ACC schools as well, so that if there is any level of disruption, that they want the ACC schools to know, hey, you got a home with us, the way that the 4 Pac-12 schools did: Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado. And so I don't think that anything's going to happen in the short term for the Big 12 or the ACC, but I think that in the coming years, something is going to happen. I don't think this is over by any means.
Will we ever see like a major, like a super conferences where you see like a European soccer type promotion relegation at some point, or is that too much for schools that are mid-level when it comes to football, and that they cannot survive if that were ever to happen, because there's just too much a gap in terms of the haves and have-nots in your opinion?
Yeah. The thing is, right, if you created European football right now, I don't know that any of the teams at the very top would agree to the system as it exists right now, right? We saw them try to create their own version of a European Super League a couple years ago because they wanted to hoard more of the money for themselves. And fans over there were willing to fight back, and ultimately that idea was scrapped. I don't know that the US it has quite the same culture when it comes to that. But I think that the biggest reason that it won't happen is because this is a sport where the money has never been built on merit, right? Like the idea is, in the 2010s, look at Texas, right? Texas has raked in money, and they have been the 30th best football program over the past decade, but they're number one in revenue. And the idea, even though it might be a far-fetched idea, that Texas hypothetically could fall from making $70 million in the SEC to making $30 million in another league, or to make $7 million in the AAC, that's not something that I think any major player in college football is going to want to agree to. And so I don't think that there's a real market for promotion relegation as a concept right now. When you talk about the idea of a Super League, I mean, the reality is, right, we have some version of that right now with how big the Big Ten and the SEC are relative to even the ACC and the Big 12. But I think that some of it's going to come down to individual power players, right? Like, so one thing that I've heard before is Ohio State's former athletic director, Gene Smith. He's always been of the opinion, like, we're not going to leave because it's good for our peers, whether it's, other Big Ten schools, to also be quality. That helps us as a program whenever our geographical peers are quality. Well, I think that as long as there are people like that in college football, there's not going to be a true breakaway, but times are changing, so you just never know.
Yeah, it will be very, very interesting because, not every conference can, continue to, welcome in members, and you have like 20, 22 teams in each conferences, and obviously that number seems very, very bloated, and then you're going to have to probably split into the tier ones and tier twos, and that's where I was mentioning the promotions and relegations. You have bottom tier 3 teams from tier 1, and say, for example, Big 10 or Big 12, whenever they expand to 20, and then get dropped down, and then the top 3 teams from tier 2 move up or something like that. Maybe we're not talking like a 20, 25 team conferences, and in all of them combined, where they get rid of all the conferences and just maybe merge together and all. But if 20, 22 teams are probably the direction that each conferences are heading, obviously the quality of the play becomes a major problems, because you're going to have the top teams that are always going to recruit very, very well, whereas the bottom tier teams will struggle to keep up in terms of raising monies, maintaining standards with the facilities and everything. So I'm very, very curious to see how this college football, as we enter the new territory, whether it's going to succeed or not. And certainly the first year, we're going to have to learn to deal with it, obviously, with the changes, and the traditions are all gone now. Now, speaking of changes, certainly, 2 top programs from last year, Alabama and Michigan, now they're obviously have new head coaches, Kalen DeVore at Alabama, Shamar Moore in Michigan, life after Nick Saban, and Jim Harbaugh living here in Michigan, Shehan. People are a little bit pessimistic about Michigan because of what we witnessed last week against Fresno State. My question is, which program, if you look at 2, which program do you look at and say, this school is better equipped to, deal with changes that we saw, and, both short-term and long-term? And what is your outlook for both Alabama and Michigan moving forward?
Well, I think that there's going to be a lot of attention. And look, we're recording this before the Texas-Michigan game. I think that Texas might win by 10-plus points.
Not because I think a lot of people are saying the same thing here.
Yes, I believe that they're 8.5-point favorites heading in. I would take Texas there. And I want to be clear too. If Jim Harbaugh was still the coach at Michigan, I think they might still be in this situation. And the reason is they had such a senior heavy team last year.
Right.
When you talk about, JJ McCarthy was a junior, but he was going to the
Yes.
NFL. They graduated all 5 offensive linemen. They graduated all of their receivers. They graduated their top running back, Blake Corum. And they also graduated a bunch of players on their defense, though they still have a lot of good players back as well. So this was always going to be a rebuilding year. That's why, you look back to the 2023 season and them trying to defer these suspensions, just kind of make everything take just a little bit longer so that they could protect this season. It was because they knew that 2023 was the year for them, that things were going to either happen or not. And so when you look into 2024, I mean, they did not have a true quarterback succession plan, frankly. They're starting a former walk-on right now in Davis Warren, partially because I think Alex Orji hasn't necessarily developed the way that they like, but also because you kind of look between 2021 when they landed JJ McCarthy and 2024, they didn't necessarily land a player to be next in line in some ways as well. So I think that when you look at positioning right now and positioning over the next couple of years, I mean, Alabama is in really a comparably good position right now without Nick Saban as they were with Nick Saban. And of course, it's going to be the next 3 to 5 years that you feel some of these differences, but there's a couple things working in their favor. One, they still have, when you look at metrics like the 247 talent composite, the number 1 most talented roster in college football. Like they have so many 5-stars, so many good players. Their margin for error is so big. I think that gives them a lot to work with. Another thing that I think that you look at is Kalen DeBoer is a proven head coach. He did it at Washington, led his team to the national championship game. He did it at Fresno State. Even at the lower college level, he was a 3-time NAIA national champion. He helped take Indiana as an offensive coordinator in 2019 to one of their best seasons in a very long time. So I just think that Alabama, like, they have the potential to just keep this thing chugging along. The fact that they didn't lose the vast majority of their playmakers, other than safety Caleb Downs, who went to Ohio State, like everybody else pretty much came back. And so I think that they have a chance to still be a top 5 to 10 team this year. And again, like, they also are replenishing in high school recruiting, and they were able to add some big time transfers. So I think that it's going to be a lot more turnkey over the next 2 to 3 years for Alabama than it is for Michigan. But some of this, again, just has to do with the fact that Michigan was already on track to lose so much of their production after 2023.
So that leaves Ohio State as the a legitimate contender out of the Big Ten. Obviously, a lot of people are saying Ohio State is the best team that the money can buy because of all the NIL deals that they got. They have Will Howard that got transferred from Kansas State, Quinshon Judkins from Mississippi, Ole Miss, I should say, as the running back, along with Travion Henderson. They're certainly loaded. They are probably the team to beat right now. And how much of a problem would it be for Ryan Day, who is, obviously has had to deal with a lot of criticism last year and even the year before? How much of a problem is it going to be for Ryan Day if they fail to live up to their expectations?
Well, there's levels to this, right? I mean, if they lose in the national title game, I don't think anybody's going to try to run them out of town by any means. If they fail to win the Big Ten, that's a different conversation. If they fail to beat Michigan, that's a much different conversation, especially with what Michigan loses this year.
Yeah.
But I think overall, if he has what Ohio State fans feel is a successful season, like, I think that's enough, right? If they finish, if they make it to the semifinals of the college football playoff and are Big Ten champs and win the Big Ten and have a really good chance to make it to the national title game or win the national championship, I think that helps buy him some time. But I would also make the case that this is the most pressure-packed individual season of the college football playoff era. Like, no individual coach, I would argue, has faced as much pressure as Ryan Day is going to this season. So let's just say, hypothetically, they go 10-2 and kind of stumble their way into the playoff and maybe win one game but peter out. I don't think that I don't think that there's really a scenario where Ryan Day gets fired, But I think that what could happen is both sides kind of determine, hey, would it be better for you if you were an NFL coordinator? Would it be better for you if you looked at some other opportunities at the NFL level? I don't think that's going to happen. I think this team is going to be successful. I think that they're going to blow through their regular season schedule, certainly, and have a chance at the end of the year. Because the other thing I'll say, too, is that we look at the history of college football. This is a sport filled with teams and coaches that were really, really close and couldn't get over the top until they finally got over the top. In fact, you can look at Jim Harbaugh at Michigan last year. So close, could never get over the top. You can look at Georgia before that with Kirby Smart. So close, could never get over the top. LSU with Ed Orgeron. So close, could never get over the top. So I think that Ryan Day will have every opportunity to try to get over the top this season. But if they have a real disaster of a year with the amount invested in the program, I think that they would seriously consider, hey, can we find a way to make a cordial mutual passing of ways?
My guest tonight is Shehan Jeyarajah from CBS Sports, national lead college football writer, kind enough to join us to give us his perspective on this year's college football. So already Florida is in the news for wrong reasons. They got their, butt kicked by in-state rival Miami pretty easily. And the conversation has now turned to Billy Napier's job status. And certainly I think no one is on the hotter seat than Napier right now. They have to break in a brand new quarterback with Graham Mertz suffering from a concussion in their loss last week. Certainly Napier did not do himself any favors by making comments about the basement fans in Florida and all that kind of stuff. Shehan, do you see Billy Napier surviving at all this year, or do you see him, maybe your opinion, how many weeks do you give him before he gets the inevitable pink slip?
Well, what's so complicated about Florida is that they are playing arguably the most difficult schedule in college football history. Right. They played number 19 Miami to open. They play 6 teams on their schedule ranked higher than Miami was entering the season. And also, by the way, another team in Texas A&M who started the season number 20. Florida State and Texas A&M have dropped out of the rankings after the first week, but again, two tough games still. And the other piece is that they played the vast majority of those games in the last 5 games, including playing Texas and Georgia back to back, which could be a huge disaster for this program. Right. So one of the most complicated things is you're in this situation where you have to decide, when can we even have an interim coach take over? When does it actually make sense to fire Billy Napier? I think that's going to be one of the big complications of the season. In some ways, I think that they made it easier for themselves with DJ Lagway taking over at quarterback. He is the guy on campus, the number 1 quarterback recruit in the class of 2024 from down in Houston in the state of Texas, where I'm from. He is a big time player. I would make the case that landing DJ Lagway probably is the main reason that Billy Napier was even given this year to figure things out in some ways after missing a bowl game last season. And so I think that I think that there's 2 pieces of this. I don't think that there's any way that Billy Napier is Florida's coach in 2025, but they're going to have to find a balance of, one, how do we keep DJ Lagway happy so that he doesn't just immediately transfer after Billy Napier's fired? 2, how do we put DJ Lagway in the best position to succeed, so even if Billy Napier isn't his coach next year, he's still able to grow from this? And 3, what kind of plan do you have to trying to figure out who's next? Because there are some good options that Florida could consider. I mean, one that would be fascinating is Jed Fish, former Arizona coach, now at Washington, who is a Florida guy through and through. He actually, the funny story was when he was I want to say a high school assistant, he just wrote notes and would leave it on Steve Spurrier's car in the 90s to be like, please just give me a chance. And ultimately he's able to work himself up, of course, to being an FBS and a power conference head coach now. But it's going to be complicated, I think, for Florida just to figure out the timing. Another thing just to add on top of that is that if Napier is fired, their athletic director would be in hot water as well. Right. And by the way, the university president just resigned. So they have an interim president. They're going through a president search right now at the University of Florida. They would have to potentially go through an athletic director search at the University of Florida. And then, by the way, they'd have to go through a football coach search right after that. So I think that might actually buy him some time, but this is a nightmare situation. I don't know if there's really any way for Napier to coach his way out of it.
Right. The president that you were referring to is Ben Sasse, I believe,
yes.
who was kind of a confidant to the Ron DeSantis, and it has been a
former
major
senator from Nebraska, if I remember correctly. So like he was somebody who came from outside of the state. And, again, like you said, real close with the Republican government of that state, and resigned after a year, and it's kind of left a mess.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I believe AD is Hunter Strickland. I know fans are really, really up in arms, and certainly they are clamoring for the old glory days when, Steve Spurrier and also Urban Meyer took the program to greater heights, and certainly, Florida is kind of in a state of funk right now, trying to recreate their glory days, and certainly got a lot of holes that they have to dig out of. Talking about the another interesting program, obviously Deion Sanders and Colorado. Their last year at Pac-12, his first year as a head coach at Colorado. They started off very well, and then the bottom just completely fell off the rest of the year, finishing 4-8, and now they moved to the Big 12 where they were previously, and probably should have never left, in my opinion, to be honest. Obviously, barely getting by FBS and North Dakota State. There were some questionable decisions in terms of their final positions and their clock management and everything. Are you confident that Deion Sanders and Colorado can win consistently in the Big 12 starting this year, or is this somewhat of a maybe troubles ahead in your opinion?
Well, there's two parts of this question. I don't think the answer to either is very good. When you talk about this year, right? They go down to the wire against North Dakota State, who is either the worst or the second worst team that they're going to play all year. Cincinnati, Colorado State kind of in that conversation, but they're going to play at least 9 games that are tougher than what they just played, including a road game this week against Nebraska. The other piece is that the things that they tried to improve the most this offseason, the offensive and defensive lines, those were real weak spots against North Dakota State, against an FCS opponent that really did lose a lot in the trenches from their 2023 national semifinalist team at the FCS level. So they have two, superheroes basically on their roster, and Shedeur Sanders at quarterback and Travis Hunter playing cornerback and wide receiver. But they had these players last year too, and went 4-8 and 1-8 in Pac-12 play. And so now I think in the short term, they are going to be potentially underdogs in 8 or so games on their schedule heading forward. So I don't think that prospects are all that good this year. Now, I feel like they're going to make a bowl game. I think that they'll find a way. They'll pull an upset somewhere. The real issue, though, is that in 2025, they're going to have to do this whole thing over again, but without Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. So, and I don't know what you hang your hat on if you're Colorado heading into 2025 when, they don't have a next guy in line at quarterback. They don't have a player who can play both ways or be as dynamic on either side of the ball the way that Travis Hunter is. So I think that, look, Deion Sanders has said repeatedly that the reason that he does this and why he wanted to go into coaching and why he wanted to be a major conference head coach especially is he wanted to do it for his son.
Yeah.
Sanders. Well, all three of his sons are going to be gone in 2025. Yes. So I'm fascinated to kind of see what kind of commitment is there by Deion Sanders to try to endure the same way post his sons leaving these programs. But again, when you look at things like their track record of development, when you look at how much of their roster has turned over, when you look at the kind of players that they're going to be losing after this year, and by the way, also lost after last year, it's a tough situation to be in. And we're going to learn a lot about them, I think, this weekend when Colorado travels to Nebraska.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Nebraska is kind of on the upswing right now with Dominic Raiola at quarterback, and certainly rekindling the old Big 12 / Big 8 rivals. It will be a very, very interesting game to watch this weekend. All right, let's do some lightning round questions. Who is your 12-team playoff? Who do you have on the 12 teams?
Yeah, so heading into the season, I had Georgia as my SEC champion, Ohio State as my Big 10 champion, Utah as my Big 12 champion, Miami I actually had as my ACC champion. That's looking pretty good right about now. I had as my at-large teams, it was Oregon at 5, Texas at 6, Notre Dame, I believe, at 7. I'm trying to think through right now. I had Ole Miss in there. That's,
okay.
I had Ole Miss. I had who else did I have?
Was Clemson in it? Was Clemson?
Clemson was not in my preseason one. I had Penn State in there. Let me go conference by conference. That's going to be the easiest way for me.
My apologies there.
Yeah. So SEC, I had, of course, Georgia as the champion, Texas as the runner-up. I actually had 5 teams in my preseason from the SEC with Ole Miss, Alabama, and then also Missouri. Missouri was my number 11 team. They are the team that's probably in the most interesting situation. I think that Missouri is going to be up against the number 2 from the Big 12 and the number 2 from the ACC. Right now, I have both of those teams missing for Missouri, but that's kind of the swing spot right now. From the Big 10, I actually only had 3 teams. I had Ohio State, I had Oregon, and I had Penn State as well. Then on top of that, of course, Notre Dame as an at-large team, as an independent.
So that's 9, yes.
That's 9. Then my Big 12 champ, Utah, my ACC champ, Miami, and then my group of 5 team, I had Boise State. So of course, the 12 team required to be a group of 5 champion.
That's good. Boise State is playing Oregon this weekend. That's
should be a great one.
A great one. Who's your Heisman pick so far?
Yeah, so my pick coming into the year was Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback. And, things were a little inconsistent for him at times, but when you look at his final numbers, they were pretty astonishing. He only threw 9 passes, but had 200 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns through the air, 2 touchdowns on the ground as well against Western Kentucky. There will be much tougher tests ahead for them, including week 3 against Wisconsin. But I think that he's kind of this perfect mix of big time player, giant stats on a team that I think is going to be in the college football playoff. A player to keep an eye on is Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty, a player who I was very excited about, but I think the pathway to winning from the group of 5, especially as a running back, is almost impossible. But he's going to, I think, give them a real chance to do it. And if we're just talking week 1, I'll throw a shout out to Arizona wide receiver Tetsuroya McMillan, who had 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. But yeah, big game. But I think that if you want to talk about the most impactful performances of week 1, Cam Ward, the transfer quarterback to Miami, I think he just showed he's in total command of that offense. 300 yards, 2 touchdowns in that game. I think that his numbers are going to be off the charts for this team, especially with the receivers around him. So if you're talking about a team that I think will get into the playoff and potentially have a superstar statistically, Cam Ward has to be on that board.
Absolutely. Travis Hunter, do you think he can play both positions at the next level, or do you think he has to pick one? And if so, which one would you recommend?
Well, I've always been of the opinion that he's a cornerback. Like, he is an elite cornerback when he focuses on that position. It's really hard to play both ways. And actually, if you look at some of his coverage grades, his coverage slipped at times last season just because he was playing so many plays and also, of course, got injured. But hearing from people, talking to people, reading a lot of NFL folks feel like he's even potentially better as a wide receiver than he is as a cornerback. And the reason that they say that is because his ball skills and his hands are just off the charts. Like, you look at that third touchdown that he had to beat North Dakota State, he catches the ball around a defender while getting pass interference against. That's like as good a catch as we're going to see in college football this year. And he's doing it as somebody who came in as a cornerback. So I think that, look, the question I think you have to ask yourself if you're Travis Hunter is just how good can you be as a wide receiver? Can you be a top 5 to 10 receiver? Because I think you can be a top 3 cornerback in the NFL. But if you can be a top 5 to 10 wide receiver in the NFL, I think that gives you a chance to potentially make more money and obviously have a bigger role on your team. So it's a tough question. I think it's going to be a lot to play both ways as a full-time player at the NFL level. But, I think that if there's a player who has a chance to try, it's Travis Hunter.
Absolutely. We have Shohei Ohtani doing 2 ways and having a great season. So maybe it's time, we see something similar in the NFL, even though that might, unfortunately, may have a shortened career span as well. But it will be certainly interesting. And like you said, maybe Travis Hunter could be the only one who could be great enough to pull off both positions and be good at both. I know we talked about 12-team playoffs. Who's your national champion? So preseason, sorry.
Yes, I have Ohio State beating Georgia in the national championship game. This is just a season that I think Ohio State has to get it done in the way that Michigan did last year. Like, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They, again, reportedly spent over $20 million to keep this roster together. They have the best group of receivers in college football. I actually think that their defense is better than their offense right now with some of the production that they bring back. This is the year that it has to happen, and I think they get over the top.
And finally, FSU 0-2 right now. DJ Uiagalelei not looking good so far. When do you pull the plug on Uiagalelei if you're Mike Norvell?
Well, I think it's less about when do you pull the plug on DJ and when is your next in line ready. They have 2 players who are very talented. Brock Glenn was the player who was a true freshman last year and was thrust into action, was not ready for the moment. I think it kind of messed with his confidence, the fact that that they threw him out there before he was really ready. And they also added a really, really good player in, I believe his name is pronounced Luke Kromenhoek. He's a 5-star player. They're really excited about him. And I think that by the end of the season, we might see Kromenhoek as their starting quarterback. But I think that you just want to be sure that you fix some of the issues on the offensive line, some of the issues at receiver, so that you're putting him into a situation that he's ready to step into. So again, I think that it's very likely that we see one of Glenn or Kromenhoek at the end of the year, but I don't think that they want to rush it, especially after some of the issues they had last year.
Mm-hmm. Well, Shehan, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very, very busy, obviously, with the college football already starting. Obviously, you're going to be traveling here and there occasionally, along with your fatherly duties as well. Make sure to follow Shehan on his work. You can see the Twitter handle at the bottom. He is the national college football writer for CBS Sports. And you also occasionally make a weekly guest appearance on the legendary sports radio station, The Ticket, down in Texas, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. So I probably get more texts about appearing on that than anything that I do writing nationally.
When do you get? When is your weekly appearance on that station?
Yes, so I appear at just about 1:55 Central Time on Wednesdays. So make sure and check that out. It's usually a 15-minute segment or so. I also have my own podcast, the College Football Survivor Show, with episodes coming out Tuesdays and Thursdays as well.
Shehan, thank you so much for your time. Good luck with covering college football this year. Certainly a lot of intriguing storylines this year, and we look forward to having you on again probably at the conclusion of this upcoming season. Have a wonderful season, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.